Welcome to Deep Drinks Podcast, where the drinks are deep and the conversations are deeper. Welcome everyone to Deep Drinks Podcast. My name is Dave, and today we have a very special episode. I'm actually more excited than I have been for a long time to talk to the guest, because it's going to be an adventure into Islam and I guess the problems with Islam. And I don't know much about Islam, so I'm very excited to learn about it. Before we get into it, I want to introduce a few things. So first of all, we, for those who are new here, this is a podcast where the guest chooses their favorite drink, and then we drink it together as we discuss deep issues, deep things, deep drinks, right? For me, it is currently 3:30 a.m. So excuse me if I make any mistakes as my brain misfires. Hopefully we get through this. So we have, so the first thing I want to mention is if you like listening to this podcast, you can actually check it out on Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can actually listen to it on your way to work. And the Atheist Junior episode just got released today, which was a really fun episode. We essentially just roasted Kent Hovind and hate preacher Matt Powell the whole time, which is new for the channel, which is really good. And we also have a few upcoming podcasts which are really exciting. So we have Why the Paranormal is Bullshit with Skeptic, which this is going to be a really good episode. So he was studying to be a medium or doing research to become a medium, and then he was like trying to find out what was real, what was not real, and he somehow ended up becoming a skeptic, and now is a bit of a skeptic and rational thinker online and creates amazing content. And then the following week after that, we have Michael Jones, a philosopher behind Inspiring Philosophy, and we're going to be talking about the problem of evil. He's a Christian, and he's chosen to drink scotch, so it's going to be a good one. It's our second interview with Michael Jones. That's going to be a great one. For those who don't know, we're actually pushing hard at the moment to get to 1,000 subscribers. So if you like content like this, subscribe, because when we get to 1,000, I can start monetizing the channel, which will mean that I can start making a living off this a little bit, but also that we're going to do a 1,000 subscriber charity stream, and I'm looking for a charity as well. So let me know in the description if you've got a good charity in mind. And we're going to be doing some fun games and stuff, and it's going to be a 6-hour charity stream when we get to 1,000 subscribers. So make sure you subscribe down below if you like content like this. So with that said, I want to introduce our amazing guest tonight, Nuria Khan. So first of all, I said to Nuria, I was like, look, I don't know if I can do 3 a.m. And she's like, I don't care. And she just yelled at me and said that we're doing it at 3 a.m. I was like, oh, all right, whatever. No, she didn't really. I had to convince her to do it this time. But anyway, Nuria Khan is a human rights activist and ex-Muslim who is the brainchild behind Holy Humanist, a YouTube channel that is guided by the mantra, driven by intellectual honesty. I love that mantra. Nuria promotes conversations about Islam and human rights with a strong emphasis on women's rights. Welcome, Nuria Khan.
Thank you so much, David. It's a pleasure to be here. And no, I definitely did not shout at him to do this at 3 a.m. I was actually so worried. I'm like, ironically, it's a very ungodly hour to be up. But as you said, it's 5 p.m. somewhere, right, David?
Yeah, exactly.
5 o'clock
yeah,
somewhere.
Exactly. You can't. It's fine to day drink in Australia too. So that's a great thing.
Binge drinking is also a massive problem we have here. So cheers to that,
awesome.
David.
Yeah, cheers. We what are we both drinking today? So
I know I initially told you I would probably be having a glass of white wine on a Friday evening, but then the Rioja caught my eye and I couldn't resist. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I got this was in the fridge. It's a chilled red wine. So
ooh.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. So yeah,
lovely.
I'm stoked. This
is it on the sweeter side, or is it quite...
It is a bit sweet, yeah.
Okay.
Which I wasn't expecting. I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but, I'm excited for your wine to kick in, and hopefully it will.
Yeah. My buzz going, and I'll start being even more uncomprehensible. Is that a word? Incomprehensible?
Incomprehensible. Yeah. I think it's kicking in.
Yeah, it is definitely kicking in. I'm bad at the worst times. I used to say camembert.
Yeah.
And Grand Prix.
Oh my God, David.
legitimately, like I was really bad.
Oh no.
Cool. So,
I'm
but we're not here to
praised.
talk about me and my really bad speaking skills, but we're here to talk about you. And so you're an ex-Muslim. So that's an interesting, that's clickbait right there. So can you tell us a little bit about like growing up Islamic and like
Yeah,
give us a little
sure.
bit of your journey?
Yeah, so I basically grew up in England, and it was kind of like the usual like immigrant Pakistani extended family setting. So naturally, I was living with my grandparents as well, and they're obviously a lot more on the conservative and religious side. And then my parents were kind of born and brought up here, so they were like first generation, like having the full on British experience. So Islam was always like a massive like piece of our identity growing up. And as I was the firstborn and my grandfather was like the imam of the local mosque, I naturally took such an interest in Islam anyway. From the second you're born into Islam anyway, like as a newborn baby, the very first thing is that they whisper the call to prayer in your ear. So basically, it's an expression in Islam where your entire life is between that call to prayer and your funeral prayer being read. So that's your entire
Oh,
life is between
wow.
that. Yeah, it's crazy. So obviously you're taught that Islam is like the only way and the right way. So after school, it was just like completely assumed that every day I'd go to mosque and attend Quran classes, and that's effectively where I had my first like real encounter with Islam. And we were reading the Quran in Arabic. That was actually quite good of them because that was the only time in my life where, as we were reading it in Arabic, they'd given us a small green book with English translations. But again, it was like in proper like Shakespearean English. You know what I mean? So it was very
Yeah.
like I tried to decipher it even then. I was 9 years old by the time I was like heavily going to these Quran classes at the mosque. And then again, like because my Quran teacher and all the girls and the women that would come there were all covered, as in they wore hijab. I realized that this is a massive tenet of Islam for women. So I decided, like, oh, I also want to go to heaven, and like I definitely want to abide by Allah's, commands. So I decided to put it on, even though nobody in my actual household wore hijab, which again, as a child, really weirded me out because I know a lot of people, and we can talk about what's happening recently as well, and well developments with the hijab, but most people's story is that they're pressured to put it on. I was weirded out because I was pressured, like when I was like trying to put it on and say, this is a choice that I've actually made for myself. If Allah wants it, I want to go to heaven. Therefore, I want to be a good Muslim woman and do what I'm supposed to do. I'm of that age now. 9 is a very special age in Islam for a Muslim woman. So yeah, they were like, are you sure? But are you sure? And then later on, as I progressed, I was really into sports and I started playing football and it just became a nightmare. But they were actually so happy when I took it off. And obviously there's underlying cultural nuances within that. Like my grandmother wanted me to have more marriage options. So she didn't want me to limit myself to somebody very conservative. So it's not really, it wasn't really driven for like, this is not like a free and fair choice she's made by herself. Like this is, it's a tool of oppression. It was more like, oh, is she going to get enough suitors?
Yeah, that's amazing. I remember having a similar experience where I asked my mum in my teenage years. My family's so open; we talk about sex and everything, like it's totally okay.
Oh wow!
And I said, Mum, I was religious, and I said, Mum, is it a sin to have sex before marriage? And she says, she goes, well, yeah, kind of, but yeah, it is, but like you can do other stuff. Like you don't just have to have sex. And I was like, but isn't that still sex? And she's like, yeah, like, yeah. And I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, wait, is it or not? Like, I want to go to heaven. Like, I want to make I want to worship and honor God with my life. Like, I don't, and I was a Christian, just for anyone who doesn't know. And I remember being just so perplexed why my mum and why many people in my life would water down what the Bible says, but then in the next breath say it's the inspired, perfect word of God. And it was like, what?
It's
Like,
so
I don't know
funny how lenient
yeah.
everyone's individual God is, right? Like when it
Yeah.
comes down to it, which makes so much sense to me now because I think about it and I'm like, wow, everybody's view or version of their God is so like it aligns so much with their personality and their tendencies. And, like, genuinely, I've seen that. And again, in Islam, I see this all the time. I promise you, my grandmother and my mother, vis-a-vis everybody around me has their own version of Islam.
Oh, that's amazing. Before we go any further, I've got a recommended version of the Quran, but I've only read the Quran once. Do you have a recommended reading for anyone who wants to read the Quran, maybe for any reason? I know that we're not going to be very pro Quran, pro Islam in this discussion, but do you have any a preferred English translation?
Oh, I definitely have a preferred Quran for sure. I was just going to grab it, but it's over there. I wish I could show.
Go grab it.
It's called the Woman's Quran, and it's basically empty. So that's the whole.
That's so good.
That's so funny. And it's literally the quickest read. And the first page says that this book is empty because the Quran is one of the biggest obstacles to women's emancipation. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And you should see some of the things that my friends have filled it up with. It's not pleasant.
Okay. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that you've gone, like, you're a badass, like you've gone full, like, human rights activist, women's rights activist. Like, I love it that you've just gone full, like, no, fuck you, like, sorry for swearing, apologize for swearing, but going, like, no, taking a huge stand against that. Have you heard of
sorry though, David, just to actually answer your question on a more serious note, for me, again, when I started to try and read the Quran in English, again, in my house, it was we had the Mohsin Khan translation which I think he is from Pakistan, and that's quite a famous translation. But again, a lot of it I was still a teenager at the time. A lot of it was going over my head. What I found is when I actually went to Quran.com, which is literally at our fingertips, if you go to that and then you look at the I think it's James Pickett Hall translations are usually quite blunt and as organic as they can be, because what we're seeing now, even on Quran.com and Sunnah.com, which is the home for like the main hadiths, the hadiths that have all passed like whatever criteria they have to be graded, and the Sunnis technically should believe in them. What we're seeing now is, as time's progressing, and even videos that we've made a year ago, now the hadiths have like these new brackets inserted, and it's all trying to be like watered down, and they're trying to make it a bit more palatable because there's some very damning things in there, obviously. But I would genuinely say go to Quran.com, and if you are reading it, flick through a few translations just so you can get the nuances of the verses, because some of them have completely taken the leniency path and changed things from like, do not take Jews and Christians as friends and greet them, and completely changed it to like, do not take them as sponsors. And it's like, a sponsor? Like, no, so be careful with that. But I would say cross-check a few. But Quran.com honestly is verified, and it helped me get out. I took it at face value. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's great. The translation that I read, and I read this, I listened to the audio version because I tried to read like a version I picked up in like a airport bookstore, and it was horrible to read. But I got this one, and it was actually by the King Fahd Professor of Islamic Studies in the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London.
Oh, that's my university. That's where I went.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Muhammad Abdel Halam. He wrote this one, and it's a really beautiful book, and it's actually really beautifully written in some spots. Some parts made me want to.
Don't fall for it, David. Don't fall for it.
Don't trust me. I'm not falling for Islam.
Okay, we're speaking easy tonight.
Absolutely not. But I have like a deep. Oh my, that was funny. I have a deep respect for religion, but only because I don't think it's true. I think that religion is beautiful as long as you don't think it's true. It's like when you see a toddler walking, like you're like, wow, like good on them, they're walking. It's like humanity's first steps at like trying to understand the cosmos, but it's like you wouldn't ever go put that toddler in like a race with like an athlete. Like they would just, we've come so much further. So I look back and I'm like, wow, this is interesting history, and wow, people used to be this barbaric. Wow, that's crazy. Oh, that's a beautiful thought. Like not I don't think it's true, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, it's a great insight into like our psyche as well at that in whatever respective time period and context and geographical location.
Yeah. So back to your story. What branch of Islam were you in? I know there's like Sunni and Shia are the main two sects. What were you in?
I was Sunni Muslim. So even if you were to ask like Pakistanis, within Sunni Islam, there's like different sects in Pakistan, especially, like they're called Deobandis, Barelvis, a bunch of other ones. And I always, like, when I speak in that to that crowd of people, I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know which one I was. But apparently a lot of people don't. So I was from like the most mainstream Sunni version of Islam,
Okay.
basically. Yeah.
Okay.
So in that, just for people, it's basically like you take, obviously, well, every Muslim needs to believe that the Quran is the literal word of God, but the hadiths that I was referring to, basically the telephone game of 1,400 years ago, is like compiled into 2 major hadith collections, and they are on sunnah.com. And most Sunni Muslims also take, so the Quran is the example, but also the hadith is what's to be followed, because that's following the example of the Prophet.
Okay, interesting. So would you say, do you know anything about Christianity at all?
I do. Not nowhere near in depth as yours, but yeah.
Were you like do you know any Hillsong, like, do you know any churches? Like, were you like the Hillsong of Islam? Was your sect the Hillsong of Islam, or was it like the Bethel of Islam? Like, do you know, or was it like the Catholic of Islam? Like, which sect would?
The majority, the main one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely
the one that everyone's like, yeah, okay, they're not like extreme. They're kind of like that's
the one that has the most numbers anyway. There are
Yeah.
more Sunni Muslims, than any others. Because even there's only certain countries that have majority Shia populations. I think Iraq, Bahrain, Lebanon, maybe that's about it. Like in Saudi Arabia, where I grew up, you can't, like, my school friends that were Shia, you actually can tell from some of their last names, but they would never disclose the fact that they were Shia, because they're actually persecuted in Saudi Arabia. So they actually go and pray more underground, because you can tell distinctly that the prayer style is different. So Sunni Muslims would pray with their hands here, whereas Shia Muslims put them down by your side. So they would actually be like singled out in Saudi Arabia. So they've come up with their own. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. I know so little about Islam, and this is all interesting. I'm okay with
up, David.
Yeah. So when did you realize Islam was a problem?
Oh wow. I realized, so I left the UAE because I was living there at the time, and I escaped from like a crazy situation. But when I came back to the UK, I think in 2017 it was, then I really started like doing my own research and being like, no, wait, let me see if this checks out. Like, how would I was on a mission to defend my faith from what I had experienced in the UAE, because they had actually tried to like kidnap me in a sense and like keep me hostage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you go into that? That to me, that is profound. Like I could imagine that would happen in like North Korea or something, but I didn't realize like Dubai it would be like this, you know.
Oh yeah, you and me both. So just for your viewers, basically I was living in the UAE, and I got married when I was quite young, and then like very quickly the marriage fell apart. There was like a lot of abuse there, which first of all I had no idea about abuse or like how it manifests and what kinds of abuse there are. So that was a huge learning curve when I finally like realized, oh my goodness, this is what's happening to me. This is why I'm like turning into a shell of my former self. This is why I'm having to watch TED Talks. But basically, I was married Islamically, so obviously if you haven't added that clause into your marriage contract in Islam that you are able to have the right to divorce through courts, by default women are not given the right to divorce in Islam. So in wanting to pursue a divorce, obviously if the other party does not want to let you go, or they don't want to grant you the divorce, technically there's certain Muslim countries have progressed, and they've got this thing called a khulla, which happens in Tunisia, which you can get in Pakistan, and that effectively gives the woman the right to go through the courts and say, I want a divorce, and usually it is granted. But again, if somebody is even more like bitter and conniving, which is what my ex-partner did, he basically employed a lawyer, and they picked up some ancient archaic Sharia law, which all comes back to the obedience of a pious woman and obviously a pious wife. So this law states that any woman who you fear disobedience from, or if you fear that she's going to leave the home or whatever, there is, it's called ta'a zawjiyya in Arabic, and it's still talked about more in Egyptian circles, and they've done entire like fatwas and discussions and stuff on it. But when this police officer in the UAE called me up and said, we've got this order for ta'a zawjiyya on you, And I was like, sorry, I have no idea what you're on about, mate. Like, can you explain what
Mm.
that means to me? And then he basically said, like, you need to go back to your husband's house and return there, and you cannot leave without his permission. If you don't go back by this time and date, we will arrest you and forcibly take you back. So with like me,
So
obviously, yeah, go ahead.
so you broke up with your or you left your husband because he was abusive, right? And so you're trying to like stay away from your abuser, essentially.
Exactly.
And the police told you had to go back to your husband.
Yeah, and the police who basically, like, I mean, for the longest time, I had been going to the station and reporting because I had moved. Bear in mind, I'd moved back into like the house with my parents. I'd got a new job. I'd essentially like moved on with my life, and I'd filed for the divorce to be initiated. But then I obviously like found out that he had been following me from work and back and showing up at my workplace or events that I was at after work, and my friends had spotted him or whatever. So I had gone to the police many a time and said, like, I'm being stalked and harassed and somebody's constantly watching my window, and they didn't take any of that seriously at all, like to the point where I went as such a good respectful Muslim woman. Like I went in a abaya, and they actually are even more like toxic and misogynistic. They would just keep me there in a room with them for like hours and just have like baseless discussions, and then their colleague would come and sit with me and talk for how, and I was just, I mean, it was such a demeaning, demoralizing process to have to go through that like for weeks on end. And I'm telling them about like serious issues and safety concerns, and they've got like the Arabic like miswak, which the Prophet used to clean his teeth with, and they're just like, but why, like why would he do that? And they're just not concerned at all, to the point where when it got very, very serious, I had to call the emergency number for British expats in Dubai, because I was like, these people aren't ensuring my safety. And the amount of things that he was doing, I knew that there's incidents in Dubai where, if he's paid them off enough, because he was really lurking around my area and he'd kind of paid off all those police officers. And if you do that enough and you hand over your passport to them, you can just end up as a number on their system. And so, yeah, they like the police in Dubai are not allowed to contact women or harass them after like 10 p.m. They would call me at like 10, 11 p.m. at night and just order me to come to the police station and give over my passport. And I was like, no, it's 10 p.m. I'm not legally obligated as a woman to come to a police station. They came to my house as well. They tried to catch me there and tried to take me again in the middle of the night. And I used the Islamic laws on them. And I said, well, my father, in Islam, you have to have a mahram or a guardian always, because you're not your own, you don't have agency as a woman, right? So it's either I've gone back from my husband, so I'm with my father. So he was actually away from the country on business. And I said, you cannot take me and forcibly remove me from my house without my guardian knowing. And then I also said, if you're going to take me right now, let me call the British Embassy, because I need them to know that you have taken me. And then they were like, okay, no, like you can come tomorrow. And so that, and also they bought 4 male police officers, which is what you usually do when you're trying to charge somebody with like adultery or something so heinous like that you have to trap them in your country. So they were trying to charge me with that. And again, I flipped the Islamic law on them, because I'd lived in the UAE for a couple of years. And my friends and I would discuss the fact that, I used to think the UAE was so good and used to protect women. So I knew for a fact that if policemen are coming to your house after 6 p.m., you're not legally obligated to go to the station with them in their vehicle if there's not a police woman officer present. And there wasn't, because they were trying to like catch me in a thing for adultery or whatever, because again, my window was being watched. So one day when I had friends over, they were like, let's take one and let's get him in the back of a car and let's get her in the back of a car. And I said, sorry, you've not got a police woman officer, I'm not coming. Whoa. So between saying that, it was madness.
That is just like, and so was your ex-husband, do you think he was trying to pay these police officers off, or do you think that they were just upset that you were trying to divorce someone, or like why are they putting in so much effort into try to ruin your life as it appears?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it's a combination of both. First and foremost. So there was like also some serious underlying mental health issues there that I eventually like realized, right? That's what you realize when you're living with somebody day in, day out. You realize that their behavior has completely changed. So what was all of it to begin with? Was it a mask? Was it a front? But once that kind of it starts to crumble before your eyes. And then I realized, like, trying to approach his own family to say, hey, this is what I'm noticing and this is what I'm seeing. Are you guys aware of this? But when I realized the reaction from them when I told them was not like, oh my God, like what's going on with our son or our brother? It was more like a reaction of, oh shit, she's clocked, or like she knows.
Oh no.
That's when I was like, I am up against, I don't know what here. And, you know, like, yeah. So it was, and so that drives a lot of things. Like, trust me, Islam is, again, I was still a Muslim through all of this, but the things they were doing, because I had to go to like Islamic marriage counseling before you can get a divorce. And he would say things like, she's possessed with like, there's like a jinn inside me. A jinn is like an Islamic demon. And like, she needs exorcisms because she wants a divorce. She's not thinking straight. And I'm like, oh my. And then the counselor would say, like, how many times a day do you pray? You need to pray together. And then his family, when I'd obviously moved back to my own home with my parents, I'd wake up to like potions of what is like done in Islam, which is one of the biggest sins, but like black magic, like just concoctions of crap, like weird shit, like weird shit. And like, yeah, I'd just be woken up to seeing that outside my villa. Like, I had a little dog. There was some weird, like, creepy things. Like, it was just, yeah, it was horrible.
Wow, that's so bizarre to me. Well, so I guess the black magic didn't work because you're still
well, David, I actually stepped around it as opposed to over it, jumping in my Uber to get to work. So maybe but technically it should still have had the desired effect. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's weird. So this is more debunking black magic than anything.
Exactly. Well, I got out and I got a divorce, and I'm sitting here talking to you today. So clearly it doesn't work.
Yeah. Praise.
And there was some weird things in that. Yeah, David, there was literally like, there was like fish eyeballs and like weird things, like weird ingredients that you have to source to come up with this stuff.
That's crazy. That's so weird. I want to talk to some people who've done black magic, because to me it's super interesting. Like they do some like really weird, like cat's bones and like just random, like it's like what you imagine, like a
nail clippings, like, weird shit.
like a really dark 5-year-old come up with, like some like really messed up 5-year-old. It's like, let's do a potion. And he's like, okay, you need a rainy day and you need a nail clippings and
yeah, like, you know, I always get reminded of like the witches in Macbeth, you know, and they're like, what was it? Something, toil and trouble. And they're like mixing the potion.
Yeah, that's funny. So were they court appointed, or not court appointed, but like law appointed marriage counselors that you had to go through?
Official ones. Yes, exactly. So before they even file your application for divorce in the courts, they say, well, let's have some little counseling, and lo and behold, it's the most like pious, or outwardly looking pious, misogynistic man there trying to tell you that your abuse and everything you go through is just, you know what, you can still go and pray with him and then have a cup of coffee in public, like trying to say, I do not even want to look into the eyes of this person anymore. Like, are you hearing me when I say thing is, over there, like things like mental health and personality disorders, they would literally, like, they don't understand me saying that to them. They are believing his stance more when he's saying she's possessed, therefore she wants a divorce. Like, they have no idea what borderline personality disorder is, or how I'm about to go and start explaining it to them, right? And again, just on a quick note, because you are Muslim by your name and whatever, your default law that you have to follow there is Sharia. If you are Muslim, like you can then request to follow English law. So that was my backup plan, was to say, obviously, I want to implement English law in this state, because at least English law recognizes mental health and obviously abuse and things like, yeah, I mean, I work in that sector now here, and I just see how completely, vastly different the approach is. Here, we're always trying to safeguard the victim, and there it's like, you're crazy because you want to leave your husband, and we're going to make it hell for you to do so.
Yeah, right. That's so. Is Sharia law different around the world, or is it just one blanket thing?
So technically, like, Sharia has certain prescriptions, like obviously for, like, you know, adultery and thievery and stuff, like there's amputations and lashings and all of that. But obviously the way it manifests in each individual country depends respectively on the country's history and their their relationship with Islam over the years. So like in Pakistan, it was the constitution and everything was a lot more secular, and then we had this dictator come in, Zia al-Haq, and he actually bought we call them hudud, like the most strictest Sharia punishments, which include amputations and beheadings and things like that. He actually brought that into law and made it part of the constitution, and therefore like the blasphemy law and all these things kind of like turned up a notch. In countries like Tunisia as well, Egypt, for example, where the law came out from, where the one they put on me, the Daz al-Jia, that is very much still discussed in Egyptian circles. But countries like Tunisia and Lebanon and places have completely progressed beyond that. So it wouldn't exist. My shock was thinking and falling for the fast that Dubai was this crazy, modern, progressive, wanting to attract Western tourists and Western investment kind of model. So they would, like as a Muslim woman, because Dubai, the crime rate's low, you don't really get sexually harassed and things like that. It really doesn't happen. You live a really good life as an expat there. So in your bubble of being a Muslim woman, you think, oh, they're so nice. Like even the police officers, the fact that they can't take you, like I used to big that up. Is that so good of them? It was just a matter of time when I actually had to use that to like ensure my safety and freedom. But yeah, so it manifests quite differently in every country depending on where they're trying to go. That they're also their case law and precedent and like what, like some women have. India, for example, triple talaq, which is guaranteed in Islam for men. It's actually like it's there, it's codified. A man just needs to say the word divorce. I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you 3 times. And technically, Islamically, you are divorced. Or there's something akin to that as well. If you say to your wife, like, oh, you remind me of you're the back of you looks like my mother or something, she's also immediately divorced. Like there's these weird things.
That's so bizarre.
I know, it's so weird. But yeah, so India then now has abolished triple talaq, so that can't happen. But if you are a believer, this is the point I'm trying to make here. Like, for example, even in my situation, because it was abusive, like a Muslim man can pronounce 2 of those divorces and then leave you hanging on the 3rd one. But if you genuinely believe in this faith, like when he pronounced the 3rd one, even then he's like, oh, that was a joke. In my heart of hearts, I thought to myself, in God's eyes, we're not married anymore. Like it's not. But yeah, so that's obviously a thing that exists.
Okay, this is super interesting, and I've just repositioned myself in the chair. You can tell I've gotten a bit tipsy now, so I'm gonna start ranting.
Right.
How much of this? So I have one of my best friends is Muslim, but it's funny to call her a best friend because we kind of like became friends online and we like chat all the time. She's not. But so when we talk about like these things, we talk about cultural differences rather than Quranic differences. And the thing that I have always noticed that I think Islam has a specific problem with is Islam makes the decree that the Quran is explicitly from God, perfect. Like it's not written down essentially by man. It's like word for word exactly what God said. Where the Bible, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, they don't have those problems. And I sometimes wonder if that one thing is what has stopped Islam from progressing like the other religions tend to have. Because like, and just to I'm just going to read a little section of the Bible I carried through ministry college. So just to give you a taste of
fun.
what,
please, yeah.
So this was one of the scriptures that I read to someone, like someone in my church, and said like, this is causing me some, because this is a New Testament scripture, meaning that it's the new covenant, it's instructions from Paul, it's right up next to like all the other stuff that Christians like to quote. And so these are instructions on worship, 1 Timothy 2 verses, and we'll start at verse 8. I want men everywhere to lift up holy hands in prayer without anger or disputing. So that's the man part. Now this is the woman's part. I also want women to dress modestly and with decency and propriety, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or expensive clothes, but with good deeds appropriate for women who profess to worship God. Now, this is where it gets messy. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She must be silent. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not the one who was deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. But women will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, holiness, and propriety.
David, you're making my ears bleed. No, 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 no to all of the above. No, just no. I
know,
really
so
have serious beef with the Abrahamic God, honestly. He's so anti-women. Like, what is wrong with you? Why create us, honestly?
I know, it's bizarre, hey. But something like this is dismissed by Christians, and they'll say, well, that was for a time. You know, I still hate, you know, they still hate the gays. That's not for a time. But
Exactly.
they hate, you know,
they still hate abortion. That's not for a time.
But yeah, exactly. Even though there's explicit instructions in the Bible to murder infants,
yeah, true,
of neighboring nations.
Yes.
But it's and they're live infants too. They're not even ones that are in the womb.
Yeah, it's infanticide. Yeah.
Yeah. But this one is dismissed all the time. Like, you know, you got Christian women pastors and things like that. And I wonder, like, why can't Islam have the same thing? Why can't Muslims be just as hypocritical as most Christians? In fact, I think they are, to be honest. I think most Muslims around the world are just as hypocritical as most Christians. But why can't there be a reformation of Islam? Do you think it's possible?
Well, honestly, I think you really hit the nail on the head where you said it, because of the very fundamental claim of Islam, which is that the Quran is the literal word of God, like verbatim, these are God's words. So how do you go about reforming God's words? And even if you were trying to reform God's words, surely the first question that pops into mind is that God's words are meant to be infallible. So how am I, a simple human being, here trying to like edit God's words? Like, who am I? But again, it's even like the amount of exegesis they've had to do on every single Quran verse to try and make sense of it. And some of them are complete mysteries to them still. Like, there's certain parts of the Quran, there's one bit that says Alif Lam Mim, and when you recite it, you just say like Alif Lam Mim for the longest time, and nobody knows what that's referring to. Like, it's even the exegesis of it is just and now theories are coming out which make a lot more sense, which takes a whole nother turn into like mantras and magic and masonry at the time, and yeah, that's a whole nother episode in itself. But yeah, I think exactly my views on Islam reforming are very similar to yours. What I think is happening is that Muslims as people are reforming, because they're having to keep up with modern times, and the ones that live in the West especially are kind of forced to integrate on certain things now. You can't be seen really in certain circles to still be homophobic because your Allah says you should be. Like, you have got to look that gay couple in the eye and give them the same respect that you would give to any other human being, regardless of what you're thinking inside, like, even if that's the case. But I do think that Muslims are going to slowly become more progressive and tolerant. I just don't think the scripture has any leeway for you to do that, because the second you start to dispense of the scripture, it calls into question the entire fundamental existence of Islam and its very claims that it makes for itself. I mean, if you told me when I was a believing Muslim that you need to change the Quran, or we need to just not believe in certain parts of it, or by the way, that bit sucks, let's get rid of that, I would be like, who do you think you are? And if that's the case, then I need to seriously consider whether this Allah is who I think he is. If we as humans are coming up with better stuff, then there's a problem.
Yeah, and I don't know if you have this in Islam, but in Christianity, it's like God's ways are above our ways. You know, like it's just dismisses it all. Or man's wisdom is folly to the Lord, and it's like you can't really win. Yeah,
exactly. So why would you want to insert man's infallibility over what is meant to be the most perfect word of God anyway, right? But yeah, we exactly the same thing. We have the same concept. Like every Muslims throw this in everywhere. Like a God who works in mysterious ways. It's all part of God's bigger plan. And humans are created dumb. Like we're not privy to certain information that God knows. So the Quran itself like deters you from thinking about the afterlife and death and things like that. It says, oh, like matters of the soul. I'm not saying it how it's written, but I'm just paraphrasing. But it says matters of the soul are basically beyond human comprehension. So leave it to God. And that's the kind of thing to just nip any critical thinking in the bud.
Yeah, exactly. I love what you said, by the way. I just have to bring it up again. I love how you say on your YouTube channel, I had it written down before, but
driven by intellectual
honesty. It's so good, because I remember a big thing for me coming to terms with Christianity was realizing that every one of my Christian teachers and family and friends and stuff weren't being intellectually honest when I brought them like tough questions. They were being, and it's fine if they didn't have the answer. I might even still be a Christian. Oh, probably not.
Yeah.
But it would have taken a lot longer.
Yeah.
But it's like, it was the intellectual dishonesty. It was me going, this doesn't really feel right. Doesn't really make sense. This is really uncomfortable for me. And then people just wanting to dismiss it, like wanting to be like, oh, God's ways are above our ways, or that's man's sin entered the world, so this is why you're having, and I love that you just put it like that, driven.
Yeah, because honestly, David, I love that you've actually touched on this, because I don't think I've actually talked about this with anybody as to why that was the first thing that came to my mind when I was like, okay, let me actually start speaking about Islam, because it's so problematic. The only reason I was able to get out, because I look at my peers and people around me and my friends, and they're educated to the same degree that I am, right? My parents are very well educated. Like everybody around me it must have these thoughts. But the only reason I was able to actually get out is because I followed those signs from what I read in the Quran, then I verified with the Hadith, then I looked into the Prophet's life, then I kind of put everything together, then I searched it online myself, I watched videos from both sides, and I was literally just letting my mind do its thing, but I was following the evidence, and I wasn't burying my head in the sand. For the first time when I saw something, I for the first time had an adult conversation with myself, and I said, Nuria, you're going to read this book. You're not going to read it like you tried to read it as a teenager, or you thought it was like the most amazing thing, like it's almost too sacred to even touch when you're a child. You, without all the bias of this being like, I used to sit there as a teenager and be like, when I'd open the Quran, I'd be like, God is talking to me now. I'm about to converse with God. But when I actually went through that stuff in Dubai and I came back and I'm like, literally with a legal mind, I'm like, how did they put this law on me? And I was like, oh my God, that's so clever. Legally, I got you too. Like that works. That checks out. I'd have a hard time defending it. And then I was like, no, how? Again, back to the thing being the Quran is unspoiled, untouched by man, supposedly, according to Islamic theology. So for me, when I saw that in the Quran, when I saw wife beating was sanctioned, when I saw the treatment of women, it was such a big red flag, because I was like, Allah hates me. Allah hates my kind. Literally. The guy hates me. Like, why create me? Why should I bow down to you when you're saying my worth is less than this man next to me? Like, are you for real?
Does the Quran or does Islam have a literal like monetary value of worth less? Because I know in Judaism and Christianity, women are literally worth less. Like there's like, if a female slave dies, it's like 50 shekels. If a male slave dies, it's like 150 shekels or something. It's like some number. Or if a daughter dies versus a son dies, it's like literally monetarily different. Is it the same for Islam?
Well, David, how's this? So in a court of law, if you and I were up against each other, your testimony would be considered full. Mine would be half. So there's that. And second of all, if you're a son, go ahead.
Is that just a culture thing, or is that an
No, this is Sharia. This is Sharia. A woman's testimony is worth half of a man. And then Muhammad is so kind enough to elaborate on why that is for us. And he says it's because women are deficient in 3 things: religion, intellect, and something else. religion, piety, intellect, and something else. And the majority of us are in hell because we answer back to our husbands. So all of this is because he's saying a woman is deficient in intelligence. Therefore, you are not able to stand your ground in a court of law and have enough agency. You need another woman, lest you forget. You need to be reminded and, egged on by this other woman to equal a man. And not just that, but inheritance rights as well. A son gets half, and then a woman gets like half of that. So yeah, it's just all over the shop.
It's all there. I have a similar, I think our brains must be similarly wired, because I did a similar thing to you, but my thing was young earth creationism. So I remember looking at young earth creationism, finding that the Bible kind of that if you add up the dates in the Bible, it adds to the earth being 6,000 years old. What about biology and human evolution, or 6,000 years old, sorry. And I was like, I'm going to research this, and I just pulled up this document, and I haven't opened this for a long time, but this was 2016 or 2017, and it's called The Objective Truth of Origins. So I don't know if you can see that. I'll probably zoom in. But it's I say, in order to get as close as possible to an objectively truthful view of reality we all live in, and for the purpose of this document, I have mentally done all that was in my power to put aside my personal, spiritual, cultural, or emotional beliefs, with the understanding that any truthful worldview will have evidence to reach those conclusions without my justification. So I wasn't worried about it not arriving at God, because I believe God was true. So I was like, I can follow the evidence where it leads. And then I went on to just research papers after papers after papers after papers after papers on every subject, and just link to them.
Wow,
just so I can get to the bottom of it. Because I was like, okay, well, let's really look at this. If we evolved from a common ancestor, then obviously there'd be evidence for it, and obviously there will be no evidence for it. And then when I looked at it, I was like, oh, there is evidence for it. I was like,
so amazing what you can find out on the internet, isn't it, David?
if you go to the right sources. But that's the same thing. What you're saying before about doubting the Quran, it's the same thing with Christianity, in that young earth creationists will say, Jesus spoke about Adam and Eve. So if you're doubting what Jesus said and what Jesus believed, then why not doubt everything else that's in the Bible? Did Jesus really die on the cross? It makes, and a lot of people like Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis and stuff, they believe it's like a plot of Satan to deceive the world,
by leaving footprints of evolution and stuff, right, to test our faith as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The devil put, or another one I like is the devil put the fossils there to trick us,
confuse and trick us, to see if we fell for it. My goodness. No, but also I'm so grateful that you touched on the intellectual honesty part as well, because I think when I did do that subliminally at some point, it was a little bit of a dig to be like, let's face the facts here, because those were my first few videos as well. All I tried to do, because I know if I could sit you down in a one-to-one context and I would present you with that source and you had nowhere to run or hide, you would be literally as disgusted and shook as I was. But all you're doing is trying to close your ears and be like, la 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 la, it doesn't exist. It's just leave me be in my state, which I will. But that was the whole initial thing of my channel. I'm like, mate, this is purely intellectually honest. Here's the source. What do you think? Because that's what I think that means. Yeah.
I love what you said there. I think we have the same brain, because I love what you said there, because I've had that fantasy a million times where it's like, I wish I could just get this person and lock them in a room, and we're both locked in this room, and we define terms, and we have to agree at the end of this conversation on this. We're reading the same source, we're reading the same information, we're defining every single letter of the alphabet if we have to, and we're going to agree at the end, and I'm going to find out that I'm wrong, or they're going to find out that they're wrong. And I just I've got this I just wish you could do that, but because so many people, they just you have conversations with them, and I'm sure you get this with Muslims, they'll duck and weave. You'll tell them something and they'll be like, well, what about this? And they'll just move to a different subject, and they just move the goalposts around like crazy. And you're like, whoa, can we just talk about what we were talking about?
Yeah, most definitely. And for me, it's like also when it becomes so apparent, because like for me, it's so easy. Like when you do, you go for the low hanging fruit in Islam, especially like if it's out of the Quran, because no matter what sect or I like to call it like species or breed of Islam you follow, um, what you have to, the fundamental claim is that the Quran is like legitly the word of God. So you can like dance and dilly dally around the hadiths and whatever till the cows come home, but the second you say, well, Quran 434, let's have a chat, they're like, oh my goodness, no, let's not have this conversation, da, da, da. Like each religion, everyone's is their own. And they literally, you see the panic tactics that are ensuing, because if they confront the very fact that there's something in there that might be, you know, it just morally reprehensible, but also uncomfortable for you as an individual living in 2022 with your mind and the way you treat your own family and your views and your morals and your politics and everything, for you to think that your Allah could have screwed up that badly. That so like I honestly just back to what you were saying as well, sometimes when a video comes out of mine and it's doing really well, like even my video, one of my first ones about feminism and Islam are just completely, that's an oxymoron. My mom was she obviously like she's just a beautiful like individual. She just obviously wants the best for her child, right? She was so excited like for me, and I was like, Mom, actually, like, please don't watch it, because I was scared. Like, I know how much her faith means to her, and whatever cotton candy version of Islam that she has, it really helps her through life. And I was like, I
Yeah,
don't want you to see those hadiths on the screen that would make
yeah,
you be sick, because in
yeah,
Islam, it is honestly, it will make you sick. It's not easy
yeah.
reading any of that. Yeah. As a
I
woman, especially.
Yeah, I bet. I actually like, so I will do the same thing with people. If a Christian comes to me and they say, I really don't want to give up my faith, I don't want to be challenged, I go, great. Like, but I said, like, go check out this person. Like, I always talk about Inspiring Philosophy. He's coming on again. Like, I think he's not perfect. I think he's wrong in so many things, but I think he's as honest as you can be as an apologist. So I point people to his direction all the time. I'm like, hey, look, if you want to keep your faith, like, great, whatever. I'm not gonna but like, this is what it's like. We can have a conversation if you're ready to have a conversation, because people's faiths are so important to them, and if they're not ready to have that conversation, you just push them further into cognitive dissonance. And then I'm tempted. Let's do it. Let's
We're
have a
always
discussion.
tempted.
No, sorry, I was changing subjects. I'm tempted to have a discussion on Quran 434. What is that? I don't know what that is. What verse is that? What does it say?
Yeah, well,
you said let's have a conversation. Let's do it.
it's basically how Islam instructs you, what Allah instructs you to deal with your wives when they're not completely obedient and listening to you. So
Yeah.
you basically need to, like, warn them, and then you need to separate your bed from them, like you're doing them such a favor, honestly. And then thirdly, you need to beat them. And that's it. That's why I'm going to leave it at beat them, because that is the original translation. I don't care for apologists saying lightly with a toothbrush, like a miswak, like just a tap on the wrist, like that's not
What translation would you recommend?
anyone that doesn't add anything after beat, to be honest. If you go to Quran.com, maybe try Picket Hall, or maybe even Mohsin Khan. I've been slacking in my Quran reading, because obviously it's shite.
Oh yeah. So I'll read it. Men are in charge. This is Picket Hole. Men are in charge of women because Allah hath made the one of them to excel the other, and because they spend of their property for the support of women. Sorry. So good women are the obedient guardians in secret, of which Allah hath guarded. As for those women whom fear rebellion, admonish them and banish them to beds apart and scourge them. Then,
scourge usually says strike, scourge,
okay.
beat. But the actual Arabic word is daraba, and daraba translates to like beat and strike.
Right.
And the way that they would do it back in the day, in those glorious days, according to Islam, the days before Islam were ignorant days, but Islam has it all sussed out. So what they would do is they would beat them similarly to how they would like tame their like chattel. So they would get the branches of the date trees, and that's the same thing I was saying about the policeman earlier. You use a bit of it to like clean your teeth, but you can also turn it into like a whip-like thing.
Okay.
So it's like almost like a whip, but you're like they're hitting the horses and the camels with that as well. But that's what they would use to beat their wives. And then there's a prescription in Islam, I think similar to Christianity as well, like how to beat your slave, but how to beat your slave a bit differently to how you beat your wife. So
Yeah.
yeah.
There's how to beat your Hebrew slaves, and then there's different instructions for non-Hebrew slaves.
Yeah.
In the Bible. Yeah. And Jesus didn't reform it. Jesus didn't reform the slavery scriptures. But so
No.
okay, so I've been having a lot of discussions with Muslim TikTokers, debates.
Oh, you're
Um,
brave.
they're everywhere on there, and
How's your mental
not.
health, David? You're right.
Oh, it's fine. I had one
Okay,
conversation
good.
that actually was pretty good. I think it went for like 3.5 hours, and by the end, it was a respectful conversation. Like we disagreed and stuff, but we're both respecting each other,
Nice.
and the people and stuff. And then there was another one where the guy was like it's so bad. Like there's a little clip of it on my YouTube channel, but I go like, can Allah's words be corrupted? And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay, is the Hebrew Bible from originally from Allah? He's like, yes. I'm like, but, and he's like, so do they corrupt it? Yes. It's like, but can Allah's words be corrupted? No. So were Allah's words corrupted? Yeah, he fixed it. Okay, but I know he fixed it. But between when it was it ever corrupted? Allah's words can't be corrupted. And like the dude was just like on a loop, and like he was ducking and weaving, but I wouldn't get off the point. And that was an interesting conversation. But
You got him in a corner.
fruitful.
Yeah, because look, I see where he's coming from, right? Because the Quran says that they have like corrupted their scriptures. But yeah, you've got, because again, that's what I mean. Like even with Islam, the claim it makes, like, oh, we're the perfected version of the Abrahamic faiths, where you're getting basic entry level stuff wrong about their faiths in your very book. So your Allah, who supposedly created Judaism and Christianity, and those two messiahs just weren't doing a job up to scratch, that you had to do it all over again in Arabia, and much worse, can I say. But yeah, it's so, as a Muslim, you can't deny that. The Quran tells you their scriptures have been corrupted and they believe in this, yada, yada, yada. But then that also came from God. So there was some stand-up comedian made a really funny joke the other day. And he was like, oh, I was with one of my like white friends, and there was a loud noise on the train. And he was like, I was like, oh, Jesus. And my white friend turned around, and this guy's obviously Muslim and of like Pakistani or Indian origin or whatever. And he was like, oh, my white friend turned around and said to me, see, in like a moment of like sheer panic, where's your Allah Muhammad gone, mate? You remember Jesus.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you would not want to hear a loud bang and then hear me shout Allahu Akbar after that.
No, you get tackled by
like
everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah, but sorry. So the point was, he was basically saying
Yeah.
that for Islam and Muslims, Jesus is like the vice captain of Islam, because we do consider him a messiah anyway. So kind of, it is already like a bit of a catch-22, because yes, the scriptures have been corrupted as per Allah, but also Jesus is one of your top prophets. So, and also then you completely disagree with what actual followers of Jesus believe, how he died versus what the Quran says happened to him. So that's another point of contention.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I've had a few conversations and watched a few. I've noticed that what they do online in these TikTok like apologetics, Muslim apologetics things, is they get people to concede that there probably is a creator. That's the first. As soon as they've got them on that point, that there has to be a creator, then they move them to like all these like arbitrary points that they think point to Islam, which they do if you take all their idea, like you just believe everything they're saying. But like this one guy, I was like, no, I can't. I have no idea if there's a creator or not. And then he's like, well, you have to. He's like, where do we come from? I was like, we came from probably the same place you believe your God came from. Yeah. He's like, well, no, God just always was. I'm like, so why can't we say that about the universe? Like, what? I have no idea what happened before the Big Bang. I don't even know if before the Big Bang is a sensible statement. Like, what? So give me some. I need some ammunition. Give me some hard hitting. Besides Quran 4:34, what are some other hard hitting? Because the only thing I could think of was the moon splitting in two.
Yeah.
And then they just say miracle, and you go, okay, Like,
Oh
and no one
yeah,
saw
yeah,
it because it was
David,
a miracle.
don't you know, David? Everyone was asleep at that time, okay? They couldn't
Yeah,
see it.
yeah.
Everyone was fast asleep. I think Ali Dawah, somebody said that. But no, let's fill up your armor. What can we give you? Okay, I'll think of
Because
quite.
they'll all say there are no scientific inaccuracies in the Quran, and I'll say, well, doesn't
Are
that
you
say that
kidding me?
that's
The
what they all
Quran
say. They say,
says that like this like sperm comes from between the backbones and the ribs. That's
oh,
not
okay,
true. Yeah,
yeah,
embryology is all over the place in the Quran, so you can definitely deep dive into that. And then again, the
yeah.
creationist argument as well. I think the
But they'll,
Quran says that water, like God's throne is basically on, or like on top of the seventh heaven, he's got a throne sitting on water, and there's a whale that's basically holding the curvature of the, like not the curvature, sorry, they thought it was a flat earth. A whale is holding the earth on its back. Sorry, I can't even say it to you like without creasing. Like, what are you guys on? King
it's
Solomon
so
had an army of talking ants. Like, David, I'll send you a list of so much. Like, don't even
that's
worry about it.
that's so amazing. It's so many, like, because I've
The
got a
sun,
lot of,
sorry, David, the sun
yeah.
bows. The sun every day when it sets, it goes under Allah's throne, and it's such a good Muslim that it prostrates under Allah's
Oh,
throne, and then it
okay,
asks Allah for permission to rise again. And the
right.
day that it doesn't prostrate and ask for permission, it will rise from the opposite side. That's it. We're all effed, mate. That's the day of judgment.
So so yeah, it's so funny. I remember trying to explain these things because I got a lot of friends that never grew up with religion, and trying to explain like creationism, or they're like, wait, we came from monkey, like, no, we evolved with common ancestor with apes and stuff. And
Yes.
then I'm like, well, no, they believe that that's all a conspiracy. And they're like, what do you mean? It's like, well, they believe that, we have all this lineage back to 6,000 years. And they'll be like, well, isn't there civilizations older than that? Yeah, but they'll believe that they weren't really. And it's like, and then they're like, oh, how do they, what about the fossil record? Oh, they believe that happened from Noah's flood. What's Noah's flood? All these animals, every animal in the world, and bug and insect and everything, got on one big boat and floated around for a year and then
But if
left.
these are Australians, come on, you would at least know what penguins and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, look at the Australian. Oh my
Yeah,
god.
yeah.
Oh my
We
goodness.
the Aboriginal Australians have been here for like 40,000 years. Like, we got paintings of
Yes.
21,000 years ago. But
No clue who Muhammad is or Jesus is.
yeah,
No clue
exactly.
whatsoever.
Yeah, and they didn't see the moon split in two, or at least they didn't write it
They
down.
were asleep, David.
Yeah, they were asleep. But like, and just trying to explain the story of Jesus, like from a Christian perspective, I'm like, well, I was like, so God he was angry with us, so he flooded the world, killed everyone, and then he gave us a way to make him happy again, which was to kill an animal and to slit its throat, and I don't know why, to give them pain sensors and stuff. And he kill them, slit its throat, burn them, and then God would love the smell. And then he would, eventually we kept sinning anyway. So then God came down and sacrificed himself to serve as a loophole for rules that he created that he can't circumvent. And they're like, right. I'm like, and he's coming back with trumpets, and then everyone's going to be taken up. It's just like, the more you think, and there's a place of eternal punishment and a place of eternal pleasure, and you're like, this is so bizarre. How do people buy into this?
I mean, it's
Like,
abusive, David. Like, literally what
yeah,
you're
it's
just saying, just
so
to sum it
abusive.
up, is literally like saying, oh, let me sacrifice myself to save you from what I would do to you anyway. Which is,
Yeah.
honestly, now that I'm fully up to scratch on what abuse is, I would say that is an abusive entity right there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. There's
That's why it
sacrificing.
has to be a slave master relationship, right? Sorry to cut you off, but that's
No,
the
no, go.
dynamic. It's always a slave master relationship at play. There's this completely subservient mentality that you've got to internalize to do that. Like, in Islam, we take it to the nth degree, where we're like, we bow before, not we, sorry, I want to completely distance myself from those people. They say things like, we bow to nobody. We bow our heads before nobody but the Almighty. But like, you're still a slave to something, mate. Like, you're literally a slave. Like, the whole thing of like, being a bit like, Islam does not mean peace. It literally means like to be complete subservience.
Submission.
Submission, exactly.
Christians will say that Christianity is the only religion that God came down to us and loved us, like
In
God,
flesh,
Jesus
yeah.
came down. Yeah, and it's like, but then it also says that every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. It also says it also says that we're already a slave to sin. There's that 1600s poem that I really love by Folk. I don't know, Folk Granite. So anyway, created sick, commanded to be sound. And
yes, I love that.
Yeah, it's just, and that's in everything, right? That's in every religion.
Oh, David, that for me, when I was on my journey of trying to figure out truth and unravel Islam and unpack it, and really I was having a serious conversation with myself, because every single cell in my body at that time wanted to stay Muslim, right? Because that is literally like, I mean, I know nothing else. What is life? It's all meaning. Like that existential crisis ensues if this is not the truth.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, what you're saying, it resonates so deeply, because when you're in that state of mind, you're not able to like follow where evidence actually leads you, because you want to. You're trying to look for confirmation bias, right? The entire time you're trying to, like, I went in delving into these sources being like, let me see the words where my God protects me. Like, let me see those words where, it's going to be, I literally thought this is a manifestation of a beautiful, perfect religion that men in positions of power are just on a power trip, and they're misogynistic and they're screwed up, but that's them. And all those arguments you can buy into this, like culture, not religion, blah, blah, blah. I would have taken all of those covers to protect myself and not face the truth. But when it was actually staring me in the eye, I'm like, no, this God sounds like one of those police officers. It really sounds like we could interchange them. And it's like, hold on a second. But when I listened to Christopher Hitchens, Daddy Hitchens. I think I was listening to like the Four Horsemen, and then I listened to Hitchens in his debates, because I just think the way he mastered the English language is like, I mean, it's mellifluous to my ears. I can listen to that man speak all day long.
I don't even know what that word is, and that is beautiful. What a perfect word to describe it. Yeah,
it's so, oh my goodness, it's like an orgasm. Oh wow. Like and he's also dropping such knowledge and truth bombs at the same time that I'm like, do I listen to your amazing articulation of that, the syntax of that sentence, or do I think about what you're saying? But exactly when he said, commanded born sick and commanded to be well, that I was like, that was a massive moment for me. Like that just struck a chord. And I was like, hold on a second, what kind of twisted, I was like, not even individual, twisted entity, twisted anything does that? Like makes you created and that's what I was just like, that's when Christianity automatically went out the window for me, because I was like, whoa, mate, original sin is just messed up. And like, at least in like Islam or like in Muslim cultures that I've grown up in, it's very much like you're not culpable for your ancestors' sins, or like the sins of your previous generations or your forefathers or whatever, which I think is quite healthy of a concept to acknowledge. Whereas when I like Christianity was like, oh my days, like the guys died for me to be good. Like bloody hell, why am I not being good? Yeah,
exactly. There's he's really good. He's the only person I've ever, and I hate I hate homophobia and stuff. Obviously, I've got a lot of gay friends, but it's the only time I've ever been somewhat accepted of someone using the F slur, like because he said it in a debate with some Catholics, and he used it to point out how disgusting the Catholic, the Christian idea is, which is like, I'm not going to say it, but he says like. He says, like, you guys condemn my friend Stephen Fry. You're a child made in the image of God. No, you're not. You're an F slur. And just the fact that he used that word in a debate in front of like a huge audience, and like he did it without even stuttering, it's like, it was a horrible word to say, but it's like it bring to light the seriousness. Like, no, this is a really big problem. Like he didn't tap dance around it, and
he took it to a whole new other level, David. He was like, I think he said at one point, like, I would rather Stephen babysit my children than any one of the clergymen. Like I would be on the I'd be like dialing 999 immediately if I that was so good.
I just have
Oh,
to
what a
read this
legend.
out, and I haven't been reading the comments because I want to stay connected in this conversation. But every time Digital Hammurabi posts, I have to read it out. He said, "How do you, as an atheist, ground your ultimate your ultimacy of instantiation for the necessary conditions of possible impossibilities, providing for ultimacy?" Pff, such a joke. So he's just being funny, or she's just being funny. It's either Megan Lewis or Dr. Josh. They're friends of mine.
Oh.
I love them so much. He's pretending to be Darth Dawkins. Have you heard of Darth Dawkins?
No, I haven't actually.
He's just the cringiest. Like he does these like debate bro tactics and debates atheists online. That
Oh.
he just says a bunch of gibberish like that, and yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Can you tell me about? I haven't been bold enough to ask a Muslim about this yet, but can you tell me about Aisha? Aisha?
Yeah, I can tell you that she was like given absolutely no choice, and there was no such thing as informed consent when she was a 6-year-old girl playing with her dolls, and she was married off to Muhammad, who was 52 or 53 at the time. Um, and then it's actually written there, word for word in our scriptures, that he consummated the marriage with her when she was 9 years old. And there's like various, I mean, I'm telling you, not Islam is not an easy read. It's not easy to digest. As a woman reading it, me talking about this every Sunday when I bring up these hadiths, it honestly, like, it makes me feel sick inside. This is codified child marriage, and you see it play out in the darkest, most like horrific scenarios in the modern context still to this day. The reason I talk about Islam and the reason I'm willing to laugh about it and honestly like just show it for what it is and actually say this is a joke in the modern day and age is because we see men in Afghanistan who are selling their 6-year-old daughters to be married off to men who are old enough to be their grandfathers. And they have no choice but to do this. But this is culturally accepted. This is actually like a norm in these places. But I mean, you can say that this is culture and whatever. You can harp on about that till the cows come home. But the fact is, Islam actually codified this. If you take Islam at face value, if you are at least in the mainstream fold of Islam, like I was as a Sunni believing Muslim, I think that you are supposed to believe that the Prophet is the most timeless, eternal, infallible, most beautiful, perfected human example to follow. Men must emulate him, women must revere him in every form. And I'm sorry, because of that, people are willing to give away their daughters to men who are literally like 60, 70 years old. They are selling their daughters for a price to these men. And you cannot cut the cord. If this was cultural, I would, again, intellectual honesty, I would say that. But the fact that Muhammad himself, who is a timeless
he's an
example to
example.
humanity, and he's done this, we cannot dance around it. I'm sorry.
So if I was a Muslim, according to the Quran, would I be okay in selling off or giving away my 6-year-old daughter, to someone who's 60, 70 years old?
Oh, yeah, most definitely, David. I'm not sure if you're
Okay.
aware of Muslim Dawa boys in the YouTube scene, but Ali Dawa, for example, he has categorically said when he was challenged on this very point, he categorically said, if my daughter is 9 years old and whatever she's reached maturity, I would marry her off. So, I mean, that's how damaging this
Right.
ideology is. But also just, I always talk about like the damning effects of this, but for me, reading Aisha, like, again, we go back to the telephone game of the hadiths, but think reports that have come out of Aisha, reading that as a woman in 2022, reading between certain lines that Aisha's saying or certain instances where, for example, the Quran was supposed to have a very, 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 oh my goodness, I'm so grateful this verse did not make it into the Quran, but it's basically a verse for breastfeeding adults. So men and women can't be in the same room if they're not married, or you're basically, you could be married, so you have to cover and blah, blah, blah. So the way to get past that was that you would suckle on the woman's breast 10 times and then it's all good. So Aisha conveniently said, that verse of the Quran, when I was sleeping, I had it under my pillow, but a tame sheep came into my room and ate it. And I was like, you go, girl. Yes, you saved us all so much bullshit. And another thing she said, when Muhammad is obviously coming to her, she's literally like, Muhammad's personal life is just so scandalous. So one of the times when she obviously catches him being really shady and wanting to just sleep with multiple women, including his slave women, she literally says, "Oh, I fear that your Lord hastens to fulfill your desires," and like she says things that are very much like landing Muhammad in it. Like she was ahead of her time in terms of the things that she's left behind. So I say, if you are leaning towards like even a little bit of feminism in this day and age, if you read Aisha and you like try and connect with her woman to woman, you're like, I see what you're onto there. And again, it's just all down for Muhammad.
Is there a book that you'd recommend, or anything you'd recommend reading if someone wanted to read Aisha?
Again, straight from the sources, I'd recommend you go to sunnah.com and you type Aisha into the search tool and you read the hadiths that have been recorded and reported to have been narrated directly from her. But it's very telling. I mean, she talks about how the women used to stay together. There's an instance of domestic violence there. You see how Muhammad handles it. He literally, like, I mean, it gets very problematic. But Aisha, I would say for 1400 years ago, the I'm not going to say woman, she was a girl at the time, was more feministic than most Muslim women are today, ironically.
Wow. Okay, so how, say there's someone who is like wanting to leave Islam, or wanting to question their, or not question their faith, but because that's even hard for them to. Someone who's listening to this who may be a Muslim who doesn't like what they're hearing, but they've lasted this long. What advice would you give to that person, that man, that lady?
Wait, so sorry, do you mean so they know they know that things are problematic, but they don't want to confront it? Is that where they're at? Like, what's this
let's say someone's watching now who's a Muslim who doesn't really like, they just walks away from the cognitive dissonance anytime these issues come up, and they don't know what to do because their faith is so important to them and it's their identity. People will start asking questions if they just started not wearing a hijab, things like that, or if they're a man, if they started drinking or something. What would you say? What advice would you give to someone who's questioning like that?
See, that's a tricky one, because that's actually what most people around me, this is the exact phase that they're in. And my only thing was to just carry on being myself and saying the things that I would normally say, while respecting their boundaries, not shoving anything down their throat, right? Because that's not my intention at all. Like, I'm not here to tell you what to believe at all. I'm just saying this is what I found out, and hey, it seems like it's a recurring problem. And so there must be something theologically linked to it. But what I would say is I think it's a slow, gradual burn. And what you will do is that you'll keep coming across, or you'll keep having thoughts where it just doesn't sit right to you. You really have to confront your fundamental beliefs. And again, going right back to the reason of my channel, a lot of people are happy to just not do that. And I understand. I get it. I get that your religion and your version of Islam is really peaceful and honestly really cozy and cuddly. Like, if your Allah is really the Allah in charge, I am so down for that heaven and I'm so down for that Allah. But the thing is, it's not. And that's not through any fault of your own. It's just you don't know how dark and violent and morbid and homophobic and racist the actual scripture is. So it makes sense that you don't want to confront that, because as we were talked about earlier, we touched on, I mean, everything ensues then. You've got existential crisis. You're like, where's my morality come from? Like, you're reassessing everything you've ever known. Like, as in, I say that the moment I realized Islam was not true for me, it felt like somebody had pulled the rug from under my feet and I was just falling. Like that scene in Alice in Wonderland when she's like falling down the rabbit hole. I was just like falling into this abyss of, okay, first, and there's so many layers to that. It's like, wow, I might have trust issues now because people I looked up to as actual figures of authority, i.e. my Quran teacher, my parents and my grandparents, everything they might have taught me is completely lie and false. But I've learned that by myself. And then hold on, you have a whole other like set of questions and you're like, am I crazy? Because am I the only one who thinks about Islam like this? They all love it. They're all happy in it. What's wrong with me? And then you go, and then thankfully there was the internet, and I found Twitter, and I went on YouTube, and I was like, whoa, there's other people who also agree with me. Like, I'm not crazy. So there's that whole element. But yeah, there's so many layers to it, because obviously if this is something really near and dear to you, you don't want to confront it. And that's why I think one of the bravest things a human being can do is to be intellectually honest with themselves. Because like, I mean, like, look at the flip side. Even if you want to throw like Chuck Pascal's wager in there or whatever the flip side may be, like, is it real? Like, honestly, David, I don't know about you, but like mental emancipation for me, I know you talk about homophobia as well, like Aria, like the fact that I had to like, I was such good friends with people who identified as literally being gay, and I would have the best time with them. But I would lie in my bed at night and think, are they going to burn in hell because Allah does not accept them? So like, what's going on here? Because he's so nice or she's so nice. Like, what's wrong with me? But like, I want to save them. And like, there's some weird superiority complex there as well. Like, oh, I'm born normal, quote unquote. Like, I'm born okay. I'm born under the remit of God that would get me to heaven. Like, that's one point that I don't have to contend with, is my sexuality. Like, that's just, again, that's pure luck. What if I was born a Hindu in Goa, or I don't know, like I was born into like.
I think this is where the idea, though, it comes from, like, you can catch the gaze. You know what I mean? You're not born gay. You catch the gaze from other gays and things like. So it's,
and that's why they have correction therapy and all that bullshit. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Right. I was mentioning before that my wife and I are having our first child through IVF. We're super stoked.
Oh, congratulations! I'll drink to that. Let's drink to that.
Yeah, I'll drink to that. I always have this joke that if they were born straight, I'd still love them. So
yes,
I'm so on the other side where it's like I want to support. I'm the biggest. I've got a shirt that says ally. Like, I'm like all there for my LGBT friends. In talking about being intellectually honest, someone I think was thought that you were saying that Aisha was in the Quran, and they said no, it's not true, not on the Quran.
No, she's in the Hadith.
Our Hadith. Yeah, please clarify your mistake. I don't think it was a mistake. You never mentioned it was in the Quran. You explicitly said it was in the
Sunnah.com, which is by definition not the Quran. So Mojo, you know what I'm talking about. Hi Mojo, by the way, you're a regular. Nice to see you here. Yeah, no, I definitely that's a schoolboy error I would not make. Sorry. But also no, go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that we're being fair to Muslims and stuff as well. Because
we're being intellectually honest, David.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yes, we wouldn't be otherwise.
Oh, look,
no, I would definitely hold my hands up if I made a mistake. But yeah, thank you, Mojo, for clarifying that.
This might be inappropriate to even ask, but do you find that anything in the Quran that you find as nice now that you know the whole context? Like, is there anything that you go like, that's good advice, or like that's kind of sweet, or something like that, or that's beautiful?
Oh, I'm really trying here, David. Okay, I'm really, really, really trying my best.
This is the intellectual honesty test. This is like the biggest test
this
of all.
Really is. I know, and and like, even the nice things that are coming to my mind, I'm like, that's still not like that good though. Like, I'm like, that's not like, I'm trying to vouch for Islam and being like, there's a good thing here somewhere. I'm really trying. Oh my god. Do you know what?
I'm gonna
I don't know, because he stopped like even like adoption and things like that. Like, he made like the opposite of what you would expect. And like, I can talk about the charity part, but that's one of the pillars, so that's different. But I will say, one of the Meccan surahs, when he was more peaceful, because Muhammad had not as much of a following and he had to be tame. And there's a line where he literally repeats it like ad nauseum. It's not even like nice sounding. He's like, yeah, to your religion, your religion's for you and my religion's for me. Oh, mate, those are the words that should have like just stuck with you, not like you are not a good Muslim until you've considered or thought about jihad. Like that should not have taken that dark turn. You should have just stayed. Yeah.
I just Googled beautiful Quran verses, and there's one that says, Allah does not burden the soul beyond that it can bear.
Thank you, Allah. How nice of you, mate. You'll just burn me just to the point that I can take it. Thank you.
And he found you lost and guided you. I mean, there's some nice stuff in here. Look, I'm just trying to. I mean,
nice enough for me to hold on for however long. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And you know what? And nice other stories to like embellish it, but stories you learn are like so completely fake. Like there's this really, really widely peddled story like about this woman, and it's completely false. It doesn't exist anywhere in Islamic sources or scripture, but it's a woman that used to basically hate Muhammad, and she would like chuck like rubbish at him every day. And one day she didn't chuck rubbish at him, and then he actually was like, oh, I didn't get rubbish chucked at me today. Let me check on this woman. And he went and checked on this elderly woman. That exists nowhere. But you're told this, and you're told like that's the kind of man that you're dealing with here. And also his sweat smelled like roses, David. And
gross.
you know, he's just
that's so gross. To think that you would smell someone's sweat and be like, delicious roses.
Oh my goodness. They would apparently like dip their hands and stuff into like some of the bowls he had washed his hands in, or like things. It gets very like culty and weird with like the reverence towards Muhammad's bodily fluids, and like it's weird.
There's in Christianity there's that verse like where the woman caught in adultery is about to be stoned to death, and Jesus comes and says, let he who's without sin cast the first stone. And everyone always puts it in every Jesus movie. It's the most beautiful. It's not in the earliest manuscripts. That was later. Yeah, that's a later thing. I think it's only in the Gospel of John. Yeah, so it's like it's not in the earliest manuscripts, and it's like, oh, darn.
I did not know that. And is that like a recurring thing, or is that just like mentioned in one gospel, or like where is that found?
I don't know, and I'm only quoting Professor Bart D. Ehrman on that, so I haven't like fact checked it myself, but he's like textual critic, so you'd know if he was making it up, but it's not in the early sources. Doesn't mean it's not original canon or anything. It could still be what actually happened, but it's just not in the original sources.
How interesting.
I've got a couple of actually before we do that, can you tell the gruesome story about someone snapping legs between two camels or something?
Oh my goodness.
Or is that too dark? Is that too dark?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's Islam, so
yeah, okay, all right.
But yeah, I haven't brushed up on this recently because there was a couple of incidents which are some of the most horrific, and this is one of them. But if I'm not mistaken, she was she's a rebellious woman in terms of like the Prophet's message and stuff. I think she was maybe one of the poets, because he killed a lot of poets initially. Also, that very much corresponds to like the way the Quran was written, because the entire form of like poetry and this like oral transmission was so widespread in Arabia at this time, because they weren't really lettered, they weren't really writing as much down as they were passing down stories and oral traditions. So a lot of these like poets or women that would already like really skilled, and then they would speak out against Muhammad, but probably be doing so in a way that is almost challenging the mellifluousness, quote unquote, of the Quran, and how that is like read out. So Muhammad, obviously, in all of his wisdom and beautiful timeless example for mankind, ordered her death. And she was basically tied, like one leg was tied to a camel and the other leg was tied to a camel. And they forced those camels to like go on either side. So this woman was essentially split in two by these camels on Muhammad's orders. And David, I swear, I was going to say I swear to God, but I swear on freaking science and rationality, Neil deGrasse Tyson, I literally could not believe my eyes when I read that story.
That's like
I
some
was flipping
Braveheart
through
shit.
books and I was like, Muhammad did not order that. Muhammad did not. Someone's messed us up somewhere.
Yeah.
Madness.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Of course, that was a different time. Things have changed. You know, like God was only working. Allah was only working within his time.
She
I
would have
want
spread fitna in the land anyway and not let Islam to manifest in this way. Oh, she had to be dealt with. All right. Sure.
I want to jump into some Q&A. So if anyone's got some questions, I'll start typing them and start asking them now. I haven't been checking the chat too much, so I hope no one's been bigoted or anything in here because I haven't been watching.
It all seems squeaky clean, and cool. A couple of my regulars are in the house. So hey, YouTube family, I think 85's here. John Stopman's actually saying time for Beerenberg Dutch booze and cola. Bottoms up.
Oh,
Bottoms up, John.
Nice. Bottoms up. Awesome. So just before we do, as everyone's like getting some questions, if they have any questions, I want to promote your channel. So Holy Humanist, it is a beast. Like, you're just producing so much content. You got 13,000 subscribers. You just got so many videos talking about everything to do with Islam, human rights,
the good, the bad, and ugly with Islam.
And I've actually, you can see I've watched a few videos, but I've actually watched more videos because I logged into a different account when I was doing my research.
Thank you so much.
Really, really good stuff. And also for those,
Deep Drinks, sorry, I also really appreciate you reaching out to me. Thank you.
I don't know if you know this, but you were on with Derek Lambert, who his episode was amazing. I think it was Derek. You might have been on Myth Vision, I think.
Yes.
It was when the Salman Rushdie stuff happened, and just before you left, I sent in a super chat, like formal invite to Deep Drinks podcast, because I was like, because you were coming off and you didn't see it. And I was like, damn it.
Oh, sugar, sorry.
No. And then I was like, I don't care. I'm reaching out by email. But so everyone go subscribe to Holy Humanist. Also, for those who weren't here at the start, Deep Drinks podcast is a podcast where the guest chooses their favorite drink, and then we drink it as we have deep conversations. I try to be nonpartisan. It's not working that much as of late. You can see that with my recent video with are your
biases coming through, David? No.
A little bit, yeah. I'm starting to get sick of it. But so coming up, next week we have Why the Paranormal is BS with Skeptic, which is going to be a fun one, and then we have the long-awaited sequel to Michael Jones coming on, which is The Problem of Evil, a Christian philosopher, and I discuss it. And I'm going to bring out all the stops for that one, because the first time he was on, I was as polite as possible, but now we've become pretty friendly. We send each other memes and stuff. So I'm gonna take the kid gloves off, and I'm gonna go hard, and it'll be an interesting conversation. I told him that he said, he goes, I'm a bit nervous about discussing The Problem of Evil because it's quite emotional. I said, I just want you to come on and for me to yell at you about children with cancer for 3 hours. And he said, no, I'm kidding. I won't do that. How dare you? But,
oh my gosh. Well, no, so I just want to say you're doing amazing stuff, and we talked about a bit about this off air as well, but again, I would absolutely love to return this favor. You're more than welcome on my channel. I would love to introduce you to some of my audience here. I'd love to introduce you to the entirety of my audience and get your story. And I feel like we've got a good thing with the back and forth. I think, between Christian, if we can fire shots at Christianity and Islam in a 1.5 hour conversation, I think we're winning in life.
We're doing good. It would be an absolute honor to come onto your channel.
Thank you.
It's been a really, I apologize everyone. It's 5 a.m. for me. I'm really tired.
Please go to bed.
I feel like our back and forth is really good, but usually I'm a bit more upbeat than this. I'm not
so I didn't even get the real David today.
No, you got a little bit. You got probably a more reserved one. I probably would have interrupted more, which is annoying for everyone else. So it's probably better that I'm tired.
Okay, no, but let's definitely do this again at a much better time for you. I promise it won't be some ungodly hour.
No, it's fine. I don't mind. This is better than 10 a.m. on a Saturday, because otherwise I just the day's wiped, because now I can go to sleep and stuff. But anyway, we're not ending it yet. We're still got questions. Okay.
Oh, right.
Okay.
I was just worried about
Sorry.
you, by the way, David. So whenever we need to
No,
like leave,
no,
just
no,
say peace out. We gotta go. Okay.
No, that's cool. We got some questions. So tell so pronunciation. Okay.
Beerenberg, really? I thought I was really anglicizing it, but thank you, John. I'll take that.
So this is I've got 3 questions. One of them, 2 of them I ask every guest. So this is the first question. I don't ask every guest, but I've kind of asked it already. But maybe you can just give like a punchy answer to this. But what advice would you give to someone who is in Islam and wants to evaluate the things that you have mentioned?
I would honestly say, do it, and please don't rely on like authority, because that's a huge thing in Islam, where one major reason where your questions or your critical thinking is curtailed is because they just delegate the authority. They delegate your thinking, and they ask you to delegate your thinking to an imam or a scholar or somebody who genuinely is just the embodiment of those toxic values. So you need to like actually ask yourself, if what that imam or what this person is telling me, is it good enough? Is it a good enough response? Am I actually intellectually, morally, emotionally satisfied? If you're not, which I can guarantee you will most likely be the case because their answers are so bad, you should just honestly follow your gut. And I promise you, on the other side, I am still Nuria. I'm still Pakistani. I'm still British. I'm still everything I ever was. It's just my mind is free. I can wholeheartedly love my friends who are homosexual or whichever. Like I don't need to like lie to myself and harbor
Yeah,
this weird feeling of like wanting to love them, but knowing that like eternally I can't because they're wrong in God's eyes. Like these weird battles, trying to justify why Muhammad married a child, trying to justify getting women and raping them as captives of war as part of your war booty.
that's
It's
also in the
so much,
Bible.
yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
so much easier then to be on this side and call it all out. It's harder to be a Muslim and defend that. So please trust your gut. If you're finding it hard to defend this, maybe it is because you're a better person than what Islam mandates you to be. And you need to follow that line of thinking and intuition because it's really something. Be intellectually honest is what I'd say.
Be intellectually honest. That's great. This is another question that just popped in my mind that I forgot to ask before. But how did you deal with the and take as long as you want. How did you deal with the emotions of leaving Islam? Like how do you deal with the emotional? Because there's the intellectual side, but then there's like, okay, now I'm not a Muslim. Like, how did you process that? Did you have to relearn things like?
Oh, fully. And like ironically, it's like in Islam when you go to do like Hajj or Umrah, which is like the mini Hajj, which is the pilgrimage, and you touch the Kaaba and they say like, oh, you touch the black stone and you do that and you're essentially like a newborn baby or your sins are forgiven. As I said, like leave it the like I think I was like hardcore into this research, and I was maybe in the middle of one of Master Arab's YouTube videos because it was him and Sharif Gabber who I like finally went to when I searched "Is Islam the Truth" onto YouTube. Like something as basic as that has like honestly changed my life. But having done that, like seeing, I think there was one point in Master Arab's video because I was binge watching this. I was like, I want to know, and I was cross referencing every reference he gave. I would check it like there is no tomorrow to make sure he was not misleading me. Like, because I'm telling you, my prerogative was to stay in the religion. So I wanted him to be like saying something out of context or da da da. And like, lo and behold, no, it was word for word what he said it was on that page, on that chapter. Exactly. But yeah, so when I left Islam, I was in the middle of watching one of those videos. It just dawned on me there was an Allah and Muhammad like sign in my grandma's house in front of me, and I just looked at that thinking, oh my word, like this will never ever ever be the same or mean the same to me like ever again. Like in fact my mind was going crazy. I was like seeing the Allah, like the Arabic writing. I was like, there's like a serpent, there's like mad mythology in this. It's like the Babylonian origins. Like I was going wild because I had learned so much information. But like yeah, like I didn't know who I was. I literally like I remember sitting in my room and I was like, whoa, okay, this means that everything that I think is morally right now is not my own thoughts. Those were given to me. So I was like, oh my gosh, Nuria, you need to come up with your entire own morality. Like, where are your boundaries? Where do things cross the line for you? Like, what do you agree with? And slowly, like that's a moment of existential crisis. But then, like, the more I got comfortable in that position, I was like, hold on, I'm just like being the person I was even when I was a Muslim, but now I'm not changing myself to mend into those ways. Like, I'm just like, I love those gay friends of mine. Now I could just love them. I'm
Yeah.
not dealing with that thing. So like, this was always me. I was always trying to bend to Islam. Islam was not bending towards me. So getting rid of it, I was like, oh my God, I can manifest my authentic self, which is just somebody who loves humanity. I don't give a crap. Like, I literally couldn't give like a toss where you're from or what religion. And that was always me. That's my prerogative. That's how my parents have raised me. That's what my experiences and my schooling and my friends. And even now, that's why, like, I do think I'm very privileged, like, as an ex-Muslim activist. I've not lost friends over this cause, you know, like, they are in fact, they're Muslim and they'll say, yeah, we're culturally Muslim, but like, they like also really like know the bad things. And they're like, you know what, you like do what you got to do. They celebrate me. They celebrate my 13K, my 10K. Like, they're not even in this. But yeah, it's just I feel like I'm very privileged in that sense, for sure. But I'd say be intellectually honest with yourself. And I promise you, the other side of not having to defend these messed up things is so much easier. You sleep so much easier at night. It makes so much sense why you don't have this weird purity culture and misogyny and divorce laws and having to sleep with another man before you can go back to your husband. Like, these things are more complicated than just living true to who you really are.
Yeah. Wow.
That's probably the wine talking now, David. Sorry.
No, I feel like we could keep going for ages, but
I bet.
Is it another question just popped in my mind? Are there any countries you can't go to now that you're an apostate?
Yeah, all of I think it's 12 or 13 at the minute that still have the punishment for apostasy, which is death. I can't go. I wouldn't go to any of them. I can't go. I can never visit the UAE anymore. I'll never go back to Saudi Arabia where I grew up. I will never go back to Pakistan in my lifetime, which is sad, unless something major happens there. And maybe one day if I have kids, I can show them it. But I have no hope or no optimism that that's actually going to be a reality. It's all gone. Europe and America is where I'm going to holiday, David. So yeah, that's where we'll hang.
And if you ever come to Australia, I will take my wife and I will take you around everywhere, show you around. Like, if you ever make it to Australia.
Oh, thank you. I definitely, that would be amazing. Cheers.
It is,
and right back at you when you're on this side of the world.
Well, careful, I'll take you up on that, and we'll go.
Yeah, London's always a good idea. The pub culture here, you would love it.
I've been to London and Scotland, and and most of Europe, and I loved it so much.
There we go.
It's amazing. Such a different culture with the bars. Our bars are kind of gross compared to your bars, like your pubs and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, the last two serious questions.
Yes.
What, if anything, would change your mind
for
Islam?
Oh my goodness! I'll
rephrase it. Will change your mind on the truth of Islam. So not necessarily you might still find it immoral, but you would consider it true.
That is so tough. It would have to be honestly freaking miraculous and like out of this world. It would literally have to be something like, I don't know, Gabriel actually coming down to me and being like, "Yo, woman, you're seriously misguided, bro. Like, do you want to get there?" And this is like me not on any hallucinogenic. This is not me inebriated or this is like a pure conscious experience. But I don't think. In fact, I haven't, like, I genuinely think about. I wish I could get 5 minutes alone and just speak to Muhammad and be like, what is wrong with you? Like, that would actually be more of a, yeah, I don't know. That seems more enticing. For Islam to be true, maybe I'd have to like have a concussion and
It
just,
would.
yeah, I don't know.
I know what you mean. It's like even though like if I'm the same, like if I started seeing some crazy stuff, I don't know even then if I would trust my senses unless someone else could also verify what they're experiencing or seeing at the same time, and it was consistent over, like, because I know there's also mass hysteria, because it becomes a really tough question to kind of ask yourself as well, but it's a tough question.
Yeah, and not to prolong this conversation, but like just to give a quick thing, even when I was Muslim, for
No,
example, and I was going through very tough times.
No,
yeah.
you need to prolong it as much as you want. I'm not ready for bed. I'm totally cool to stay up. So
Okay, thank
yeah.
God. I just wanted to touch on this
No,
real quick.
yeah, go.
Well, because it's really interesting you asked that. When I was a Muslim and I was going through a tough time, personally, emotionally, I actually had the most vivid dream where I actually saw the Prophet Muhammad, and as in like he was like completely, I saw him in the way that I had been envisioned to see him. So he in Islam, you can't even put a face to him because he's that like exemplar, right? You can't give him a normal human attribute. And I say now that I'm ex-Muslim, it's because him and Allah are interchangeable. They are literally, they are equated. Okay, he's basically God, and we do worship and revere him. So that's another thing Muslims need to like deal with. But I actually had a dream, like a full-on dream, where I woke up genuinely feeling like, oh my God, my heart is not heavy anymore. Like I've been cleansed. Like he took time out. Like I genuinely like was wrapped up in this belief that the sighting of Prophet Muhammad in my dream on the night of power in Islam, it's called, is the night that the Quran was revealed to Muhammad, and it's considered a really sacred night. And in Saudi Arabia and Dubai, the UAE, you get that night off. So that's a night where people read Quran more, they pray more, and like all your sins are forgiven, blah, blah, blah. But like in that sense of hysteria, you really can manifest this crap, and like your unconscious mind can lead you to believe you genuinely have had a one-on-one experience with somebody, and as a result, like your heart is lighter, or that trauma is not traumatic for you anymore, or you've learned to deal with it.
So,
but yeah.
So that's really, so I just want to touch that. So are you saying that, see, if I told a Christian or a Christian friend of mine that you had a dream that and Allah appeared to you in a dream, or Muhammad appeared to you in a dream, and after it you felt your heart being lighter and you felt, they would not believe it. They would say, no, that doesn't, I don't agree with that. I've literally told Christians this before, and they go, well, I don't subscribe to that, because they believe that only comes from God, like from the non-Allah God, like comes from Christian God.
Yeah.
So this is something I wanted to ask you about. Did you ever have any spiritual? Well, that's a spiritual experience. But did you ever have any other experiences, or can you go into more detail about that experience, or anything like that?
Yeah, so I mean, because as I said, like when I was a believing Muslim, no matter what I did, or because I was growing up in such an international environment with so much international exposure, I did not have the time to be so conservative, but my belief was so, like, it was so heavily there. And I think I was very spiritual as a person. Like I am very much like an empath in terms of my personality. And like, even today when I hear like a song, even if it's about God or whatever, if it's the music and the whatever that resonates with me, and I still love it. Like I genuinely do. So when I was a believer, obviously I'd be even more into it, because I genuinely believe that all existed, and it was, so I had plenty of spiritual experiences, which makes me realize that, oh my God, is this growth, or am I just way too stoic for my own good now? Like, what is it? Because I used to have, like, I lived in Saudi Arabia, so Mecca was 40 minutes away from us, and obviously, like, being able to go to God's house, which is Mecca, and the Kaaba is there, like, being able to do that every other weekend, when people spend their whole life savings to go and do that, that's a pillar of Islam. And I was able to like put on my abaya, have my pajamas underneath, and like do it like on a Thursday after school. And then like I was like, oh my God, like I'm so blessed, like God has chosen me, and like my family to put him so close to him. Every one of those visits was a spiritual experience. Every time I'd heard the call to prayer and I truly felt it inside, whatever was going on my day, like I just stopped, and like I guess people would say it's like akin to, I don't know, a meditative feeling at the time or whatever, but I would totally be immersed in that, and I'd be like, this is the most comforting thing ever. So every little tenet of Islam was spiritual to me in whatever way, because I was genuinely drawn to that. And now I'm just like, oh my God, I'm just I'm so rational that it's like,
yeah,
there's nothing.
The jinn's got you.
The jinns
The
got
jinns got
me.
you,
They got
yeah, and
me.
then and that's why you got divorced, and that's why you made a YouTube channel. Yeah.
Now I go to concerts and just let out that spiritual thing, you know, like the
Yeah.
music. Let me feel the music, drum and bass or whatever it is.
my when I interviewed my wife Amy and she about her journey out of religion as well, because she doesn't really care as much as I care about, like, she just kind of like shrugs her shoulders and goes, okay, I don't believe anymore or whatever. But she said that she gets the same feelings that she used to get in church. She said the exact same feelings she used to get in church she get at a musical, seeing like Wicked or
Oh, wow.
so
Yeah.
and I was like, wow,
And
that's
that's what
super
I
interesting.
mean. And that's beautiful, right? Because I again, this was part of my existential crisis where I was like, well, those things are not going to hold any meaning. I have no spiritual connection in my life. Like I've got nothing that's like transcends the ordinary, you know, something you can really, but that's not true. And I think we need to push back against the idea that religion has a monopoly on these feelings and these experiences, because I'm sorry, if you go to Amsterdam and you've eaten a space brownie or a cookie, whatever it may be, and you've gone into a club where the music is so up your street, you're going to have what I can pretty much say
Oh,
is the closest thing to a spiritual experience you probably have
yeah.
bowing in a church or in a mosque or whatever. Like for me, I'm all about that. Like I have those experiences, and it's wrong for religion to say only religion can cause that neurological state of being in my mind, because I know how to artificially manufacture that, mate. So don't worry.
Yeah.
We've got this.
Didn't Richard Dawkins write a book on this? Because he was like, he got so angry at like.
Maybe I have not read all of Dawkins, I must confess, but yeah, I think he must have for sure.
He's kind of in the naughty list at the moment for online activists or something. It's not Books Do Furnish Life, but it's another one of his books.
Oh yes, Books Furnish Life. Is it that in that one?
Yeah, books.
I've got that on my bookshelf actually. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, geez, this is really great radio. But anyway, the magic of reality. I don't know. I don't know. Sorry, I'm a little bit intoxicated. But last question. No, sorry.
Yes.
Last serious question. I got a fun question.
Okay.
What is the most plausibly true religion that you don't believe in as an atheist?
Oh, that's really good. The most plausibly true. Well, jokes that you're putting plausibility and like mass organized religion.
Yeah, like
I don't know enough about it, but like I think something like along the lines of, it's not even a religion, maybe, I don't know, but I would start with like maybe Taoism, or just the philosophy of Confucianism would be slightly more plausible to me than something as like dogmatic as any of the Abrahamic faiths. For example, the creation story, just I'm like, this is absolute child nonsense, mate. Like a Garden of Eden, a talking snake, Eve created, of course she committed the sin, that's why women have childbirth. Get out of here. Like this is, and then incest was like the tool to populate the earth, and then God still got sick of it, and then Noah's family was like, what's going on here? This is a joke. Like, but yeah, I think some of the more subtle religious philosophies, which might not be as obviously organized as the religion, are a little bit more appealing, just because I think they require a bit more intellectual groundwork as opposed to having all your thinking already done for you. So I just appreciate that more. And I feel like concepts like, I know Buddhism, again, I'm not vouching for it and I don't agree with it at all, but there are some elements which did take my fancy at some points, because even as in Islam, I'd always dabble. I thought even Sunni Islam was too rigid for me. I'm a very chilled out person. I really am. Like, I'm very much like live and let live. And I expect people to respect me being able to do that as well. Whereas Islam is like, how many stones did you wipe your bum with today? And like, you know, very like, it's so rigid. Like, you're like, what is this God on? Like, chill out, smoke a J, God, relax. Like, you really need to just calm down, pipe down.
Smoke a J, God, relax. That's got to be the quote of the stream.
Just relax yourself. Yeah. So,
I know. It's like, why is he so angry at like things that don't seem?
Honestly,
like,
Allah, if you could invite Allah to your Deep Drinks podcast, David, I think Allah might become next Muslim by the end of chatting to you.
What would he drink? What would he drink though? What would be his choice, do you reckon?
Milk and honey, because that's what's and wine that
Ah,
doesn't get you drunk is what's in Islamic heaven. So
okay.
don't those three things tickle your fancy, David.
It doesn't really sound like heaven.
Doesn't,
Non-alcoholic
right?
wine. No.
Non-alcoholic wine.
Um,
What's the point? I think they might even
uh,
say, "Oh, it might be alcoholic, but it gives you no hangovers." So that how great is God?
oh yeah, that's nice.
Paracetamol kind of works well.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Um, last, and this is kind of a bonus last question.
Yeah.
But I could keep chatting for ages. We should do this again, or I'll come onto your channel. Like, it'd be really great to stay in
For
contact.
sure, I'd love that.
But, if you could choose an afterlife, right, and it would become immediately true, which afterlife would you choose? And this includes, like, all the classic heaven and hell ones of every religion. It includes reincarnation. It includes all of it. The Egyptian religion, their afterlife, the Norse religion afterlife, where I think the Vikings were, you would all feast, and then you'd have a battle until everyone's dead, and the next morning you'd wake up and do the same thing. You'd have a huge feast with beer and wine, and then you'd kill each other again, like every day, over and over and over again. They would just battle,
God.
and die, and then battle, eat and die, drink beer,
for
and die.
eternity, like infinitely.
They loved it. Yeah, they just loved the glory. Yeah,
We are men.
apparently,
We eat, we feast, and we kill every day.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm definitely. I would pop in and join the Vikings on their feast for sure. I'd absolutely love that. I definitely pop in.
Someone fact check me on that, because I don't know if that's actually true. I just heard that, but yeah.
I mean, it sounds luscious, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, that their hell is quite like frosty and just like endless, like just cold. Which is, again, this really helped me like get out of the mindset that hell was even like a real thing, because the Islamic one was so polar opposite, and it's like desert and scorching heat and like being roasted and toasted alive. So I'm like, wow, they've got a compulsion with heat, and these lot have a mad fear of cold. Or makes sense geographically speaking. But yeah, I think I'd definitely join the Vikings. I'd feast. I'd drink a couple of pints with them in their very sick. What do you think with it? Skull, they would say. Skull to the Vikings. So yeah, I'd live it up there. I think the concept of reincarnation is quite appealing, because being stagnated in an Islamic or like Christian heaven for eternity seems a bit depressing. Islamic heaven is like, mate, I want to tap out. Like, that's just it's like a see-through brothel with like the weirdest like I don't want to be part of that. Like, that's not even heaven to me. That's like my definition of a warped hell that some mad desert Bedouin like hallucinatory, like you imagine an oasis, and this is your like deepest, darkest fantasy coming to life, and it's just been there as Islamic heaven. But reincarnation sounds cool. I've always been like, that sounds cool, right? Because it's like you get another go. And if you're not reincarnated to be something terrible, because you've done like bad karma or whatever, like, I don't want to be. So I always think, like, what would I want to be? A bird would be so cool, just because I want to experience the sensation of being able to fly. But then I would think my worst creature on earth right now, like my biggest phobia, is like crocodiles. But I was like, if I was to be reincarnated as a crocodile, yeah. But imagine if they could speak. They've been around since like the dinosaurs. They were able to like turn their breathing inside out and just go under the water. Mate, if they could tell us about what Earth was like back then, I'm like, that's power. If knowledge is power, they've got it. But yeah, so maybe something like that.
Have you heard of Bo Greaves?
No, I actually haven't.
So he's I've actually met him. I drove him around, but he's an Australian guy. He's crazy. You should never, ever, 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 ever. No one should ever do this. He risked his life way more than anything else. But he loves crocodiles, and so he goes swimming with them with saltwater crocs. And
oh my goodness,
we didn't even know this was possible.
He's like, is he braver than like Steve Irwin was with crocs?
Way more brave. Like, Stephen would never get in that close to a saltwater croc.
Oh my goodness!
It is unbelievable that he's not dead. Like, he actually got fined a lot of money for picking up these crocs, like 10 grand or something.
Oh my
Just
days. Okay. And he's
yeah.
never been like hurt or injured by doing this.
I think he's been hurt, but I don't know if he's ever been like had his arm. He hasn't had his arm bitten off or anything like that. But yeah,
Okay.
it's so dangerous.
Yeah.
But yeah, and just quickly as we wrap up,
Sure.
you mentioned hell before. We have I did a hellcast panel where myself, some PhDs in Assyriology and Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, and some other content creators did a hellcast on my main channel. So on my main channel is youtube.com/davidmcdonaldyt, and we did a kind of like a panel deconstructing hell. So yeah, that
That's
was
awesome.
really good. Yeah, and we talked about hell's history. We talked about like how to get over the fear. Talked about like what happens if you still got fear and things. So if you're struggling with that, you can go check that out, and then that might be able to help you. But Nuria, thank you.
Sorry, David. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My only thing was when people ask me now, like, oh, do you not fear hell? Like, and how did you go over that? And I just say to them that it's really hard to fear something that's like doesn't exist. It is literally like a figment of someone's imagination. So it's kind of hard to be scared of that when it's like non-existent. But that's only because I'm at where I'm at now. But yeah, I completely get you. And yeah, as I said, you're doing amazing stuff. So
oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and it was great to see you popped up in the comments the other day. And yeah, it was just great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on, Nuria, and thank you for coming on Deep Drinks. I'm well drunk and gonna have a great sleep after this.
yes.
So thank you so much. I look forward to coming on your channel.
Thank you.
People, make sure you go subscribe so you can go say hello to me over there when I come on shortly, and check out her other videos as well. And Nuria, thank you for coming on Deep Drinks Podcast. I don't know how to sign this off, but cheers.
Cheers. Thank you so much. And I'll see you again on my channel, and let's carry this on. Round 2
awesome.
on me.
Awesome.